This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Atelier with tonight's top stories from East Asia. China tightens its grip on overseas deals with new restrictions targeting Chinese technology, data and national security just weeks after Beijing blocked the Meta-Manus mega merger. Now, the Philippines and Vietnam upgrading ties to an enhanced strategic partnership and sending a firm message that peace and stability in the South China Sea are non-negotiable as leaders meet in Manila. Also, SoftBank overtakes Toyota Motor as Japan's largest company by market value. The AI boom driving a rally in its shares this year, while Toyota has gone into reverse. At least 5 people are dead and 2 others injured after a blast ripped through a rocket propellant production line at Hanwha Aerospace in South Korea's Daejeon city. And Okinawa is bracing for Typhoon Jangmi with severe rain and winds forecast. Hundreds of flights in and out of the region have been cancelled. Also tonight, sales of electric vehicles spiking in the Philippines due to skyrocketing petrol prices amid the war on Iran. EV dealers now turning to China to help meet demand. And it's superheroes galore in Hong Kong as Spider-Man, Deadpool and Superman descend on the city for its first Comic-Con. China is tightening its grip on overseas investments with sweeping new rules to expand scrutiny of deals involving Chinese investors, technology, data, and national security. The new directive by the State Council takes effect next month. It lays down the legal basis to unwind overseas transactions even after they have been completed, and also raises compliance risk for investors operating in sensitive sectors. Companies need approval before transferring restricted goods, technology, services, or related data overseas, and even for cross-border transfers of talent without authorization. Beijing can also restrict foreign firms' access to China if their home countries impose limits on Chinese investment. Now, analysts say the move shows signs of growing concern over capital outflows and pressure on China's foreign exchange reserves. And the measures could affect Chinese outbound investment, which topped $100 billion annually in recent years. And the latest Chinese curbs come hot on the heels of a mega deal between Meta and AI startup Meta-Manus falling apart under pressure from Beijing. And we've got Roland Lim here with us with all the details of what exactly happened.
Thanks, Natalia. Yes, the deal has become one of the clearest examples yet of Beijing's toughest stance on technology, talent, and foreign investment. A month ago, Chinese regulators ordered Meta to unwind its acquisition of AI startup Meta-Manus, citing national security concerns. Now, here's how the story unfolded. Now, in March last year, Meta-Manus attracted global attention as a Chinese-founded AI agent capable of carrying out tasks such as research, coding, planning, and data analysis with limited human input. Now, later that year, the company shifted its headquarters from China to Singapore, seen as a move to position itself as a global AI startup rather than a China-focused one. In December, Meta agreed to acquire Meta-Manus in a deal reported to be worth more than $2 billion. The social media giant planned to integrate Meta-Manus' AI agent tech into its own products. But the deal quickly drew attention in Beijing. Now, in January, Chinese authorities launched an investigation into whether the acquisition complied with export control and technology transfer rules. Reports said that 2 Meta-Manus executives were prevented from leaving China during the probe. And then on 27th April, China's National Development and Reform Commission blocked the acquisition and ordered both sides to unwind the transaction. By May, regulators were insisting that China remains open to foreign investment, but the Meta-Manus case has already fueled concerns over tighter scrutiny of US-linked deals. Today's new regulations appear to reinforce that approach. For Beijing, artificial intelligence is increasingly viewed as a strategic sector tied to national security, and the new rules underscore China's determination to keep tighter control over the movement of technology intellectual property, and skilled talent beyond its borders. Now, for more insight, let's bring in Daejeon. He is senior economist for China at the Economist Intelligence Unit. Now, he's speaking to us live from Beijing. Daejeon, good to have you on the show. Now, what exactly has changed here? Now, is Beijing simply closing the loophole exposed by the Meta-Manus deal, or is this something else much bigger?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Yeah, so simple answer is it is much bigger. So yes. And if we look at the official Q&A published by Xinhua, we will find that the rules have gone through a lengthy process of drafting and consultation. And it is actually one of the, let's say, the working priorities for legislators for 2026. Yeah. So we can see that it is a, let's say, systematic priority. Yeah. And in fact, 2026 is a big year for let's say, the governance of China's external activities. So prior to these new rules, China already rolled out separate rules on supply chain security and regulations against other countries' so-called extraterritorial jurisdiction. And in practical terms, it also blocked the U.S. sanctions on Chinese firms for the first time ever. Yeah, so what all this means is that China is becoming bolder and more, let's say, assertive at the global stage in terms of asserting its rights. Yeah, and of course, as the global footprint of Chinese firms gets bigger, Beijing has a sense of, let's say, making related regulatory work clearer, more coordinated, and more effective. And so, in this context, the Manus deal is probably, let's say, the most vivid example of why China needs to upgrade its regulatory regime. So, as you said, in Manus' case, which lasts for several months, several quarters, the Chinese government initial response was somewhat patchy, yes, and that calls for, let's say, a more systematic approach in regulating such deals.
Daejeon, help us understand the rules a little bit more, because beyond just money, it seems to also cover tech, data, services, and even people. So in practical terms, I mean, you said that China is being bolder and more assertive, but what kind of overseas deal do you think would actually make Beijing kind of nervous?
Well, so Beijing still doesn't like what we call unproductive investments, like acquiring a football club or building a large vacation property overseas. Yeah, but it has been the case since 2017. Yeah, but nowadays, let's say the regulatory shift is sort of pivoting. So right now, China is probably more sensitive to the outflow of its critical competences. Yeah, and by talking about critical competencies, we're talking about probably things like technologies, the critical technologies, data, and top talents. Yeah. So to use a very simple example, so the European Union has been seeking Chinese direct investments into that region, into that bloc, but now it also requires almost a mandatory technology transfer. Yeah, and that is making China quite unhappy because technology transfer is sort of a big deal for China. It is very sensitive, and it could cause China to be overtaken technologically. Yeah, so anything that, let's say, could weaken China's competitiveness in terms of, let's say, the world's prevalent, let's say, technologies such as EVs or maybe advanced AI solutions, that could hold the ire from regulators in China.
Absolutely. China seems to be holding its own when it comes to AI development. The US, meantime, that has been restricting China's access to advanced technology. Is this China's way of building, you think, its own version of controls?
Yes, definitely. So actually, China has been maintaining a catalog for restricted technologies for, let's say, more than 25 years. Yeah, so it began at the beginning of this century. Yeah, and then the list was updated and upgraded every year to include what Beijing regarded as the critical not for sale technology. Yeah, so I would like to say that even if the State Council didn't introduce the latest rules, the compliance burden still exists for businesses because there already exist other types of regulations or maybe a list of prohibited technologies, for example. Yeah, so but of course, the state council regulations will make things, let's say, clear. Like, so we want explicitly want you to, let's say, to avoid to avoid exporting those sensitive technologies overseas.
So, in other words, are you saying that for Chinese AI startups, the exit route, whether it's to a US buyer or a foreign investor, has just become much narrower?
I'd like to say that, well, the threshold has become definitely higher. So overall, AI technologies are not completely off limits for US buyers or other international buyers. So, for example, some Chinese AI firms doing AI-based voice recognition or lip syncing and technologies received foreign investments, and they were successfully listed in Hong Kong, for example. Yeah, but of course, international investors, when they seek to, let's say, to acquire some Chinese firms or Chinese AI technologies, they will need to spend more time, they will need to spend more money, and they need to hire the best lawyers to assess the prospect of their investments. And they want to, let's say, maintain very good relations with the Chinese government, yeah, to get to know what the regulators think about. Yeah, and this is never easy. Yeah, and alternatively, if possible, global investors could seek partnerships with the local players. Yeah, for example, some big, domestic tech firms or maybe even state-owned enterprises. Yeah, because I mean, by forming a partnership, it can give them sort of an endorsement. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for helping us unpack China investment controls. Xu Tianchen, senior economist for China at the Economist Intelligence Unit. And of course, Roland Lim, he will be back shortly with us for more business news. Vietnam and the Philippines have pledged to strengthen defense ties as they look to bolster maritime security and maintain peace in the disputed South China Sea. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. hosted Vietnam's top leader, To Lam, in Manila, with both sides upgrading relations to an enhanced strategic partnership. Well, they renewed a 2010 defense agreement, pledging to maintain security and defense exchanges and step up information sharing. President Marcos says that the partnership has become increasingly important as the region navigates uncertainty marked by what he described as geopolitical fragmentation. Mr. Lam called Manila an important regional partner, adding that his country wants to bring its strategic partnership with the Philippines to a new high. All right, for more on this, we have Mary Jo Ramos. She's covering the story for CNN live from Metro Manila. First up, tell us what stood out from both leaders' comments on the South China Sea specifically.
What stood out was the remarkable level of alignment between the Philippines and Vietnam on the South China Sea, despite the fact that the two countries themselves have overlapping claims in the Spratly Islands. Both Manila and Hanoi claim some of the same maritime features in the strategically important island chain, which sits along major global shipping routes and is believed to be rich in fisheries and energy resources. But disputes between the two countries are rare, with their navies demonstrating warm ties on several occasions. Both countries are locked in long-running disputes with Beijing, which claims sovereignty over most of the South China Sea and have in recent years engaged in standoffs with Chinese vessels. Yet neither Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. nor Vietnamese leader To Lam focus on those differences. In their joint press conference earlier, both leaders repeatedly emphasized international law, freedom of navigation, peaceful dispute resolution, and adherence to the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The two countries, as you mentioned, also renewed their 2010 Defense Cooperation Agreement this morning. Mr. Marcos went a step further by explicitly citing the 2016 arbitral ruling, which is one of the strongest references to the Philippines' legal position on the South China Sea. But the two leaders' language is also strikingly similar. Mr. Tolam stressed maintaining a peaceful and stable maritime environment and resolving disputes through international law, while Mr. Marcos described peace, stability, and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea as non-negotiable.
So, Mary Jo, aside from maritime security, tell us, what do Manila and Hanoi stand to gain from this strengthened partnership?
Manila and Hanoi are also using this enhanced partnership to address a much broader set of economic and security challenges. One area that featured prominently in the leaders' remarks earlier was transnational crime. Both sides agreed to step up intelligence sharing and cooperation among law enforcement agencies to combat cybercrimes, human trafficking, illegal gambling, people smuggling, financial fraud, and even illegal labor activities. And that is particularly significant because Southeast Asia has become a hotspot for sophisticated online scam networks that operate across borders, often involving or moving victims through multiple countries. And strengthening coordination between law enforcement agencies in the Philippines and Vietnam signals their understanding that regional security today extends well beyond traditional military threats. And the new agreement signed earlier on information technology and digital transformation also opens opportunities for cooperation in e-governance, digital inclusion, and emerging technologies, which both the Philippines and Vietnam see as essential areas for future growth.
Well, many thanks for that update on Vietnam-Philippines relations. Mary Jo Ramos for CNA Live from Metro Manila. Right, going to go for a short break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Nvidia planning to work with humanoid robot makers not just in China, but also in South Korea, as well as the US and Europe, amid cybersecurity concerns. And Southeast Asia's largest lender, DBS, growing its wealth management business across Asia. We'll tell you where it's concentrating on next. Hello again, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and it is time for more business news. Now, Nvidia executives are looking to push forward research on humanoid robots, but there are concerns over this. What might those be? Now, for more, let's turn to Roland Lim. Now, Roland, want to know more about this American tech company. So apparently it's working with China's Unitree, which leads in the area. But as a Chinese company, it's raising Washington's concerns over cybersecurity. Just tell us more about that.
Yes. According to the company executives, Nvidia is expanding partnerships with humanoid robot makers beyond China, as the AI chip giant looks to accelerate robotics research worldwide. Now, the company is targeting South Korea as well as the US and European manufacturers. The body of the robot will be China's Unitree H2 humanoid body. Now, Unitree's dancing robots, of course, were the centerpiece of China's Spring Festival Gala earlier this year. But other parts of the robots will come from Singapore-based Sharper for robotic hands and inside NVIDIA's computing tech. NVIDIA says its collaboration is focused on improving cybersecurity. The company plans to integrate its Blackwell chips directly into the robots, allowing software updates to be verified and helping prevent unauthorized codes from running. The partnerships comes amid scrutiny in Washington. Now, U.S. lawmakers have raised concerns about Unitree's alleged ties to the Chinese government and military and have proposed legislation that would ban federally funded researchers from using the company's robots. The U.S. has further tightened rules on its exports of advanced semiconductors. Its latest moves aims to close the potential loophole that may have allowed Chinese companies to get a hold of America's most powerful AI chips. The Commerce Department said advanced chips such as NVIDIA's Rubin as well as Blackwell could require an export license for Chinese headquartered firms even though they are operating outside of China. The guidance suggests such chips may have been used by subsidiaries of Chinese AI companies outside the country for almost a year. Now, it's not clear how many have been shipped. The US had implemented semiconductor restrictions to China since 2022. Now, they have been progressively expanded over the years. Now, in January last year, the Biden administration announced rules that control the movement of AI chips across the globe. It required licenses for advanced AI chip exports. But the rules drew criticism over its vague language and potential to hinder innovation. The Trump administration then withdrew the rule in May that year. The new guidance now focuses on future exports rather than chips already in use. CNA senior correspondent Victoria Jen earlier got up close to Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang, delving into the rivalry between the US and China over technology. Watch the conversation anytime on CNA.com. A Japanese tech investor, SoftBank, overtakes Toyota Motor for the first time in more than 2 decades. The tech conglomerate's market cap raced past the automakers after its shares jumped 14% by the close of trade today to reach a new high. Now, that brought its market capitalization to more than $300 billion, dethroning the long-reigning Toyota, whose market cap stands around $287 billion. Behind the meteoric rise of SoftBank's value is its strong earnings and bet on artificial intelligence. It turned it into a profit that was 3.5 times higher than a year earlier for the January to March period. It has also been pouring in investments into OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, completing an investment of $10 billion in April and will put another $20 billion this year. The firm is also spending more than $50 billion over the next 5 years to build AI data center capacity in France. Now, it's part of an $87 billion program in the country. The AI investment is also the company's largest outside of the US. Now, SoftBank is betting that France will be the top European hub for AI infrastructure. The move may help widen the company's sources of AI-related revenue beyond ChatGPT. It also adds to its list of AI infrastructure investments, now mostly in the US. Now, Singapore's biggest lender, DBS, will open 18 new and 36 upgraded wealth centers across Asia-Pacific by 2027, said to be the largest physical expansion for the bank. It'll serve affluent and high net worth individuals. Now, here's what the centers could look like across Singapore, Hong Kong, China, India, Indonesia, and Taiwan. The bank says physical touchpoints remain important, as more than 40% of customers in some markets continue to meet relationship managers in person. It's also stepping up tech to smoothen the onboarding process.
When you go up the value chain, up the spectrum, the process around KYC, due diligence becomes quite stringent. What we are doing today is that we use technology, one, from a digital technology to onboard clients. Second, how do you smoothen your paperwork through digital onboarding? And third, how do we use generative AI to improve the onboarding process? And why generative AI? Because generative AI helps us get data from the macro for helping us doing our due diligence.
This move aligns with the Monetary Authority of Singapore's push to shorten private bank accounts opening times for ultra-high net worth clients to under a month. With demand for wealth management services across Asia projected to reach over 5 trillion Singapore dollars this year, one analyst says banks are stepping up to capture this growth.
Most of the growth in wealth in the years ahead will come from emerging countries, okay? And the trouble with emerging countries' clients is that they are newly rich, and so the second generation need the advice. And that's when private banking comes in.
And you're all caught up with the business news at this hour. Thanks so very much, Roland.
Right, coming up next on East Asia tonight, Myanmar's leader is visiting India on his first overseas trip since being sworn in as president in April, despite expectations among some observers that he would travel first to China, the country's most important external backer. We'll explore the symbolism behind that decision with an expert after this break. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China tightens its grip on overseas deals with new restrictions targeting Chinese technology, data, and national security just weeks after Beijing blocked the Meta-Manus mega merger. The Philippines and Vietnam upgrading ties to an enhanced strategic partnership and sending a message that peace and stability in the South China Sea are non-negotiable as leaders meet in Manila. Plus, SoftBank overtakes Toyota Motor as Japan's largest company by market value. The AI boom are driving a rally in its shares this year, while Toyota has gone into reverse. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi has welcomed Myanmar leader Min Aung Hlaing, who is in India for a 5-day visit. And this marks his first trip abroad since being sworn in as Myanmar's president. The two leaders met in New Delhi today to discuss what officials described as historical and civilizational ties between the two countries. Myanmar's military-backed administration remains a key regional partner for New Delhi. The two countries actively cooperate on border security and intelligence sharing to combat insurgent groups operating along their shared frontier. Now, Myanmar has faced diplomatic isolation since the 2021 coup, when the military ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's elected government. The military takeover triggered mass protests in the country, which eventually escalated into a civil war that remains ongoing today. Now, lots to unpack here. So for more, let's bring in Dr. Murtuza, Senior Fellow and Coordinator of the Myanmar Studies Program at the IC's Yusof Ishak Institute. Well, thanks, Dr. Mo, for joining us this evening. So let's just start with the symbolism of this trip. Min Aung Hlaing chose India as his first overseas stop before Beijing, even though his regime still depends heavily on Chinese economic backing. So, Dr. Mo, how should we read into that choice?
Hi, Otelli. Thanks for having me. Let me try to unpack that question in 3 quick points. First, I think we need to understand the context. Mr. Min Aung Hlaing was originally intending to attend this 2026 Big Cat conference, but that got postponed. And Delhi and Naypyidaw then changed the planned presence of Min Aung Hlaing in India to an official visit, thus making it his first official visit since becoming president, and amidst this expectation whether Beijing might be that first destination. So, of course, the context there, of course, is previous leaders, authorities in Naypyidaw having made Beijing their first destination. I think there was that kind of consideration. Although I have to note here that in 2016, when the National League for Democracy government assumed office, President Tin Chau then made Laos his first official visit destination when Laos was ASEAN chair in 2016. My second point, of course, I think is we need to also look at it in the context of Naypyidaw's focus. It has been focusing on what it terms friendly countries since 2021. This trend seems set to continue. And of course, among those friends, I think Beijing, Delhi, Moscow, Bangkok do feature. Then the third kind of contextual point, building on that second point, is, we probably need to also look at how foreign policy or external relations decisions and judgments are being made in Naypyidaw based on this criterion of who is friendly or not to the current executive's interest, foremost of which is to assert itself as the primary and sole interlocutor for Myanmar.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying about those 3 points there, but I'm curious to know to what extent is this visit about Naypyidaw trying also to show that it's not overly dependent on Beijing? You see that it still has other regional options as well.
Right, I hear you. Well, if we look at Beijing's presence and footprint in Myanmar, it is and remains the largest and most significant. But at the same time, there is wariness in Naypyidaw towards this asymmetric relationship. And on the ground, there are sentiments that differ among the various Myanmar stakeholders, communities towards China and its presence, depending on the sector and the perception of the impact of said presence. So I think it's really that calculation coming into play here as well.
So this sort of raises the questions of how much leverage Naypyidaw really has, given that, it's the Myanmar military is now weakened at home. But how much room does it really have, to play India and China off against each other in this circumstance?
Well, I think earlier on in your overall assessment, you did mention points about national security and the kind of bilateral issues that go on among countries that share borders. So I think, if we look at it on the part of how Delhi has its expectations, it is clearly contextualizing this engagement as part of India's neighborhood first and the broader Act East policy. And national security considerations, I think the national security interests also cannot be discounted. For those border security issues that you mentioned briefly earlier on, authorities in Naypyidaw would, I think, be viewed in Delhi as India's primary interlocutors on Myanmar-related matters. So Delhi's being very pragmatic here in its calculations, and it kind of indicates that India is interested to maintain cooperation in sectors that include defense. So I think, this kind of pragmatic engagement is the kind of leverage that authorities in Naypyidaw will also take advantage of and seek to assert this electoral legitimacy since April. At the same time, of course, I think India does remain closely concerned about the insurgent groups operating from Myanmar territory. This is one of the reasons why Delhi views this as necessitating some kind of continued communication or engagement with Naypyidaw. So I think there are these concerns really much coming to the fore when it comes to the current, I think, engagement that we're seeing.
And of course, the regional diplomacy is becoming more complicated as well. So if India, China, Thailand, they're engaging directly with Myanmar, where does that leave ASEAN's unified position and, of course, that 5-point consensus?
Another valid point, Oteli, ASEAN's dialogue partners have all expressed support for the 5-point consensus. They have echoed the recognition that Myanmar's crisis situation requires a Myanmar-owned, Myanmar-led solution. But, how that is implemented, of course, this year under Philippines chairmanship, we are hearing more calls for effective implementation of the 5-point consensus. What does that mean? ASEAN's dialogue partners have respected ASEAN's decision about a non-political representative at summits, which is linked to Naypyidaw's non-compliance with the 5-point consensus. And in the past, we've seen the high-level commemorative summits with China in 2021, with the United States in 2022, and even ministerial level meetings in India, which have followed that non-political representative criterion. ASEAN leaders have also invited external partners to work with ASEAN on this matter. But so far, what we have seen, as you have observed, is neighborhood tracks and dual track engagements, which all state that they are under the broad 5-point consensus framework. So it is in everyone's interest, especially ASEAN's, I think, to perhaps have more specific indicators on what constitutes effective implementation.
Well, many thanks for unpacking the regional stakes behind this visit. Dr. Murtaza, Senior Fellow and Coordinator of the Myanmar Studies Program at the ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute. Now, in other news, at least 55 people have been killed and 70 injured after a blast rocked northeastern Myanmar. The incident occurred at a site where large quantities of explosives used for mining were stored. About 100 houses were damaged in the blast. The affected area is located 3 kilometers south of the Chinese border. It's under the control of an ethnic armed group engaged in sporadic fighting against Myanmar's central government. The group said that an explosive named gelignite was stored in the building. Now, gelignite is commonly known as blasting gelatin or jelly, and it has a clay-like consistency and is widely used in rock blasting, demolition, and mining operations. In Myanmar, the explosive material is at the heart of a fast-growing and often poorly regulated industry. And the country is among the world's largest sources of rare earths. Heavy rare earth elements like dysprosium can be found in its north. Now, dysprosium is critical for battery production, and it's also used for making permanent magnets needed in electric vehicles, wind turbines, and defense technologies. Now, Myanmar's mining boom is understood to be driven largely by Chinese companies and capital. And reports are saying that most of the country's rare earth materials are sent to China. Well, the incident has since drawn a response from Beijing after Chinese citizens were reported to be among the injured.
事件发生后，中方第一时间向缅甸相关方核实情况，请其尽最大的努力救治受伤的中国公民。目前，受伤中国公民已获得救治。中方将继续密切关注调查进展，为事故的善后提供必要协助。
In South Korea, at least 5 people have been killed after an explosion and fire at a defense company. 2 others were injured. The cause remains under investigation, and authorities are saying that the blast happened at a Hanwha aerospace facility in the city of Daejeon. The explosion struck one of the company's production sites where large propulsion engines and rocket propellants were handled. Fire crews rushed to the factory after receiving reports of the blast just before 11 a.m. local time, deploying around 100 personnel to put out the flames. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has ordered the mobilization of all available resources and called for measures to prevent similar accidents in future. Well, the war in the Middle East and the resulting energy shock are helping to drive the sale of electric vehicles in the Philippines. Data from local industry bodies indicate a 36% on-year surge in the first quarter of this year. But rising demand has also highlighted concerns over a tighter supply and the lack of charging infrastructure, with dealers turning to China to secure more EVs. Jacob Lazaro reports from Metro Manila.
Romel Asaron spends long hours on the road every day, shuttling from one city to another for work, running errands, and acting as his family's personal chauffeur. With all that driving, he's found his new electric vehicle a reliable partner.
In one whole day, in one single charge, when we go home, meron pa kami mga 40-50%.
It's also given him relief from gas prices that skyrocketed in the wake of the Middle East conflict.
Instead of me spending 8,000 per month for the gasoline, now we're just spending a few hundred pesos.
With local gas prices more than doubling since March, Filipino motorists are now seeing the upside to switching from conventional to electric vehicles. EV dealer Mike Lim says their sales have increased 8 times since the oil crisis began.
Some way, somehow, we have to find an alternative solution in terms of mobility, in terms of transportation and commuting. Probably one way to solve this is by using electric vehicles.
The Department of Energy says 14,000 EVs were sold in just the first quarter of 2026. That's nearly half of the 32,000 units sold in the whole of 2025. Sales have spiked so rapidly that supply has struggled to keep up with demand, with Filipino dealers now competing for the earliest available units.
If you look at it, most of the brands have wait lists now. Because nobody anticipated it to be like that.
With demand outstripping supply, the transport sector is rushing to bring in more EVs to take advantage of the momentum.
The last Beijing International Auto Show, quite a number of our dealers went there. We had a large contingent going to that particular motor show because now they're asking for, can we get additional quantities? What's the soonest possible time for us to get those units?
The government aims to achieve 50% EV adoption on Philippine roads by 2040, offering incentives such as car loans to encourage motorists to switch. Electric vehicles have fewer carbon emission and a lower cost of charging relative to pumping gas. But significant barriers still remain, including higher purchase prices and an inadequate charging infrastructure.
The government's EV roadmap aims to set up more than 7,000 charging stations by 2028. The shortfall is huge, with only 900 currently in operation. The DOE says many companies are interested in building more charging stations, but regulatory approvals and accreditation can take at least 6 months before construction can even begin.
There's a provision in Nvidia that we're trying to implement on the streamlined processing. We're also working with the anti-red tape authority so that those processes that are really taking time, we'll try to clamp it down.
But efficiency matters just as much as quantity. Many existing outlets are only for slow charging. The lack of charging infrastructure is a concern, as some Filipino motorists worry how far an EV can keep running before its battery runs out. Taxi and private hire vehicle operators also say charging takes up too much time.
Iba yung di gasolina ka or di crudo ka, kumpara mo sa di kuryente. Dahil unang-una, pag low battery ka na, kailangan mo mag-recharge at kumakain ng oras yun.
Clearly, both the public and private sectors still have a lot of catching up to do if the country is to hit its EV adoption targets. Jacob Lazaro reporting for CNA from Metro Manila.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, fancy a bachelor's in rare earth studies? Or plenty of options in China as the country seeks to cement its dominance not just in the mining of the minerals, but also their usage as well. And ahead, the worlds of anime and superheroes collide as Hong Kong hosts its first ever Comic-Con. Japan's Okinawa is hunkering down this very moment as the eye of severe tropical storm Jangmi passes over the main island. Powerful winds and heavy rains are affecting the region this afternoon into Tuesday, forcing the cancellation of more than 290 flights between Sunday and Tuesday, primarily to and from Okinawa. The storm is forecast to shift eastwards towards the main islands of Japan from Wednesday, bringing with it the potential for extreme rainfall along the country's Pacific coast, the country's Pacific coast. Residents have been urged to prepare for severe weather conditions over the next 2 days. The Japanese Weather Agency has flagged risk of flooding and landslides as some areas could receive between 200 and 300 millimeters of rain, with forecasters predicting winds to reach 180 kilometers per hour. Ahead of the storm's arrival, fishermen at the Amami Islands near Okinawa spent Sunday securing and tying up their boats in preparation. Local broadcaster NHK earlier reported that the approaching storm has cut power to more than 7,000 households. China dominates the global rare earths industry, but its advantage goes beyond mines and processing plants. China has spent decades building a pipeline of specialized talent to support an industry that's critical to everything from electric vehicles to fighter jets. Every year, more than 500 young adults enroll at schools, such as the Inner Mongolia University of Science and Technology. After graduating, they may remain in the city of Baotou to work for state-owned refiners or pursue further studies at a research institute. According to Reuters, China has built an ecosystem of more than 40 specialist laboratories and at least 11 universities and technical colleges, all offering rare earth-related programs to control every stage, from mining to finished products.
And for that, you also need specialized human resources. So this is why I think it's it's behind that huge investment in the graduate people with specific skills for that.
China's control over rare earths was its trump card as it fought U.S. tariffs. Western governments are investing billions of dollars to develop alternative supply chains, but experts say replicating China's decades of technical know-how will take time, especially when Beijing has increased restrictions on exports of rare earths technology and equipment and limited contact between industry professionals and foreigners. Now, Hong Kong held its first ever Comic-Con over the weekend, with thousands of fans, both local and foreign, gathering for a celebration of Western and Asian pop culture and creativity. Now, it's the latest in a string of major events the city is hoping will provide a boost to its economy. Geraldine Yap takes a look at why Hong Kong is trying to catch the wave of anime and comic tourism.
Anticipation thick in the air as fans waited in line to attend the first ever Hong Kong Comic Con. Then came the moment they had been waiting for. The 3-day event drew comic and pop culture enthusiasts, including many who came dressed for the occasion.
I'm Daredevil from the comic books.
Breaking Bad, but not Walter White or Jesse, just Breaking Bad.
I dressed up as Tanner from Deltarune, and this is actually the character.
And lending some star power to the event, Hollywood stars Giancarlo Esposito of Breaking Bad and The Mandalorian fame, and Mads Mikkelsen from the psychological thriller Hannibal. Another highlight, this display of life-sized figurines from the personal collection of Hong Kong actor Louis Koo, who's also the event's ambassador.
Even before this, Hong Kong already hosted an annual event focusing on anime and games. But organizers say that this is the first convention here to bring together Hollywood and Asian pop and comic culture, online gaming, trading cards, and celebrity meet and greet sessions all in one event. And they're hoping that this combination will give the event an edge over other similar conventions in the region.
We want to make Hong Kong Comic Con to be the regional event for the IP, intellectual property, as well as the anime fandom, where people can gather each year to first and foremost, enjoy the brands that they have enjoyed, learn about certain content.
The Hong Kong Comic Con is making its debut at a time when the city is making a push for mega events as a key pillar of its tourism strategy. Data from travel booking site Trip.com shows that over 8 in 10 ticket buyers for the event are Gen Zs and millennials, an age group analysts say is key to boosting tourism and spending.
Young consumers are oftentimes they're spending money on those attractions. So their spending behavior can be quite different from my generation or even from the older generation. They're willing to pay, like fans are willing to pay for pop toys, fans are willing to pay to see the celebrity, right? Like those kind of purchase, those kind of consumption is very, very important to the local economy.
The Hong Kong Comic Con is the latest entry in an already crowded calendar of anime and comic events across Asia. The key to standing out, analysts say, is localization.
For example, not only local movie stars, but also something that reflecting the Hong Kong cultures that will be more attractive and more able to attract high-value tourists. Because nowadays, you can see that not many tourists like shopping. Just like even the tourists from England, they like to have in-depth exploration about Hong Kong.
Hong Kong saw a 17% year-on-year increase in the number of visitors in the first quarter of this year, an outcome authorities attribute to the host of mega events held. The city will be hoping to carry on this momentum throughout the year with other events in the pipelines. This includes the Hong Kong Football Festival in July, which will see major European teams arriving in town for friendly matches. Geraldine Yap, CNA, Hong Kong.
And that wraps up Monday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at CNA.Asia. And look us up on all our socials, including Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching now. See you again tomorrow.